Hi, my name is Ksenia and I'm an author and an editor of interactive stories, and in this video I'm going to share my process, how I plan and outline my stories as an interactive stories, and also how I outline my webcomic, which I'm currently rewriting. Most likely you saw other videos on YouTube when people say how they outline and plan their novel. Planning an interactive stories or a webcomic or a web novel, it's slightly different from planning a novel. They're different because they get published in different ways. Novel usually publishes one thing and people go buy it online or in a bookstore and read it at once, while webcomics, web novels and interactive stories, they're writing at the same time they're publishing. So readers are usually slightly behind where their author is right now. Of course, I'm not talking here about official interactive stories because they're usually short stories and they're getting planned and written as a whole thing and then just published when they're fully written. So get back to our community stories. If we compare those stories to traditional publishing literature, it would be a book series. And you need to keep this approach in mind. You cannot outline the entire thing, unless it's a short story, of course. If your story has 12 or maybe 15 chapters, less than 20 for sure, then you better outline the entire thing before writing. Even if you're a pantser like me. Even if you outline the entire thing, you don't have to actually follow it like step by step, but you can use it as a reference. I usually do that. My writing is really messy. I often neglect some things I wrote in the outline, or I move it forward or switch things, but I always come back to my outline and use it as a reference. So let me tell you my process. First, when story ideas pops up in my mind, I just write it down. Any ideas that comes to my mind about the story, any possibilities that the story can have, can be messy, and it will be messy, so that's okay, nobody will see it. Later, if I find it boring or irrelevant, I will just delete it, but now I have to write it down. The second thing I do is to define the main idea of the story. So I have this brain dump that I wrote earlier. I look at it and I think okay, so the main idea will be this. And that's the only thing I do on the second step. The third step for me is characters. This is probably the most time-consuming step because I need to think through all the characters, especially the main character, the love interest, the antagonist, and answer the most basic questions about them. What do they want? What do they desire? What do they fear? What misbelief do they have? What will they learn in this story? Also, at this stage I spend a lot of time online researching for names because I want to know their names, not just only their personality. The next step is I take the main idea, I take my characters and I combine them. I write what steps should I take and should my character take, should the story take in order to achieve this main goal. Also, I may break down the goal in several small parts. For example, in my story Through the World, they need to restore the scarab, and the scarab is made of several parts. They need to find them. So in the beginning, I just write which part would be in which world, an approximate idea of this world, but I will not write any details for that. It may change 1,000 times in the future. Why would I write it now? Also, in this step, I consider if I can push this main goal forward and create smaller goals in order to achieve this big one. And now when I have my character's goals and the steps to achieving it, I create obstacles. And also in this stage, I create all the villains. I think about their motivation, their fears, and how they will be punished by the main character. So when I have all those things written down, I write the description of the story. I write my description now because I need to check if I understand the story, if I understand the characters, if I have the clear vision of the goals and the main idea of my story. Because if I cannot write the description, I go back and revise it. And once the description is written, I write the outline for chapters. I do it just as bullet points. It's really simple without much details. It's just characters do this, character do that, then this happens, then that happened, and then the cliffhanger. Here you can see the chapter's outline of She-Wolf, and this is really how it looks like in my phone. I don't do anything extra for that, and if you read my story on Spotlight, you may notice that this is slightly different to what it is in reality, but overall it's the same. Because as I said earlier, even if you write an outline, you don't have to follow it step by step. You can change it in the process, and it's normal and it's totally okay. If you don't change it, that's okay as well. That's just different people and different work styles of people. Usually I write an outline for the first 5 chapters, then I go write the story, see what I have an outline, what I have written, compare them and create outline for the next 5 chapters. Or maybe not 5, sometimes it can be less, sometimes it can be more. I try to outline certain plot arcs, and it doesn't have to be 5 chapters, This is my process now for planning and outlining the series I write. Obviously, it's not the only way you can outline your series, it's just how I do it, and I recorded this video to share my process. Maybe it will be helpful for some people, which I hope. Maybe you will take some parts from my process and implement it into yours and create your own process. or maybe you will not like it at all, which is also fine. You should have your process. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss the next update.